Hey, everybody, this is Kenny. Welcome back to the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is the podcast for middle managers who want to develop themselves, develop their teams, and improve their results. Hopefully, this never happens to you. But what if one of your employees walks in to your office and lets you know that they've just been diagnosed with cancer and they're in a late stage and they're going to be going through treatment and maybe surgery down the road? What should you say? What should you not say? Leaders, my special guest today, author of 100 Acts of Love and consultant Kim Hamer, talks about how leaders can navigate through these really, really tough times that an employee may be ready to go through, or if they've lost a loved one. She also talks about how do you deal with the death of a team member if that ever happens. You don't want to miss this important episode. Let's get at it. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is the podcast for middle managers who want to develop themselves, develop their teams, and improve their results. And this is such an important show that I have today because business and work goes so far beyond life happens, right? And so we have to know when to make that shift from talking about business to just talking about life. And I want to really welcome to the podcast today someone who has just devoted her life now to doing that and helping leaders navigate what could be some murky waters at times. She is the author of the 100 Acts of Life book. She's also a consultant. I want to introduce and welcome Kim Hamer to the podcast. Kim, welcome. It is so great to finally meet you.
Penny, it's really good to be here. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I am too. And so let's just dive right in. And why do you do what you do? And please walk us through your journey that brought you to doing what you do.
Sure. So I like to start people kind of smack in the beginning. My husband and I were sitting in we're sitting in a doctor's office, and it's a doctor who we really want to see. My husband had just been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And young, athletic, organic eating, we shocked a lot of our friends. And while he's sitting in here, the doctor is telling us all these things, and we really want to see this doctor, but he's not in our plan. And we had just had open enrollment. And so someone at work, at his job, took it upon himself, someone who he didn't particularly get along with very well, but there was a mutual respect there. He took it upon himself to fight the insurance company all the way up to the top and got us switched from an HMO to a PPO. Now, if you know anything, your middle managers, everyone knows once it's done, it's done. Yes. Well, he fought it all the way to the top. He got us onto a PPO, and my husband was able to be treated by this certain doctor. And the reason that this is so important is because he had cancer twice, and the cancer came back a little less than 2 years after he had, disentangled himself. And that's important because we had very young children. And so my kids, by the time my husband died, he died at the age of 44. And our kids were 12, 9, and 7. Each of them had their own memories, their own real memories of their father. And if we had not switched, if we had not been able to switch, the treatment that they were going to give my husband probably would not have worked, which meant that my oldest might have had some memories of their dad, but the other two would not have. And so it was something that this gentleman did out of just wanting to help, wanting to do something, wanting to have just wanting to help, really not even caring about an impact, but wanting to say, just let's see what we can do. And I think what happens a lot of times when there's a cancer diagnosis and there's people at work or there's death, people don't know, especially at work, they feel weird. They don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. And that's really true for most people. Most people don't know what to say or what to do. But when you're at work, you have that added layer of where's the line? right? How do I talk to this person now that they've been diagnosed with cancer and they're now out of the office every Thursday and Friday for treatment, or out of the office for, months at a time?
Mhm.
How do I talk to them as a human? How do I talk to them as a person who I have to work with, right? How do I have these conversations with them, as a manager, so that I can get my job done? Because you still have a job done, whether the person has cancer or not, or whether the employee has died. And how can I also feel really good about myself as a manager, making sure that I'm having that connection with the employee or my team when there is a massive crisis? And I think that most managers don't know how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I will second that. Most managers don't. And that's why it's so wonderful what you're doing, and out of the pain from your journey. So let's get some real advice then. I've got, let's say, my top performer now, and has walked into me and confidently in confidence has told me that they've got this diagnosis now, and it's going to require them to, try to work off and on. What's a couple of first things that me as a leader should do to fully support that employee?
Yeah, so I'm really glad you asked. So what normally happens is a manager's first thought, is like, holy cow, what am I going to do about this project? Right. And then they feel guilty that was their first thought.
Yes.
So they feel like, I'm a really bad human. My first thought should have been like, oh my gosh, are you okay? So the normal response managers give, there's two of them. One is take all the time you need, which is never a good response. It feels
Wow.
good in the moment,
Yes.
but it's not a good response because you have not set any boundaries. And all the time you need means something very different to you than it does to your employee. You have no
Yeah.
idea what it means.
Wow.
The second thing that people often say, and this pretty much goes for everyone, is if you need anything, let me know.
Wow.
And immediately that feels like the right thing to say because you really do mean it in the moment.
Mhm.
If they wanted caviar from Russia, you would figure out a way to get to Russia to get that caviar, right? All expenses, but you really don't mean anything. So it's not helpful for four very specific reasons. The first thing you want to do as a manager is you want to take the moment just to connect with the news you just got. It's shocking.
Yes.
This person in front of you really honestly might die, right? So you're kind of like, well, this happens to other people, doesn't happen to me. That's where your head goes. So you want to take a moment to connect with that employee. And that means saying something as simple as, holy cow, like I don't even know what to say,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Or I am so sorry, right? You don't want to launch into treatment plans and how often they're going to be missing work or what about these projects. You want to take that moment to connect. And your employee might have several different responses. They're either going to be very grateful that you connected, or
Mhm.
they're going to be kind of shocked that you connected because they have worked themselves up into coming and telling you that
Yes.
they do have cancer. It's hard for them to do what they did. So that they may be shocked, or they may automatically be launching into, okay, this is the plan, this is what, and you can say, wait a second, like this is really big news, right? And just stop the conversation. So you want to take that moment to connect. And that phrase doesn't do that. The
Yes.
second reason that phrase is not helpful is, what's anything?
Mm.
Really? I mean, anything is too big. I
Mhm.
had a toddler. Did that mean that you're going to take your brand new Mercedes that just got detailed up to the preschool to pick up my vomiting toddler?
Mm.
Or did you mean that you were happy to drop off a six-pack of beer or a bottle of wine, right? Anything is too big. So you haven't really offered anything specific, and that's not helpful. The
Mhm.
third reason it's not helpful is because you now have put the pressure on the person who's already under pressure to figure out what they need. And unless it's their second, third, fourth rodeo around, they have no
Yeah.
idea what they need. They just don't. And you usually don't know what you need until you need it.
Yes.
So, you know, I've heard people say, I didn't realize I needed a ride to the cancer treatment until I tried to get in the car and drive and realized I shouldn't be behind the wheel of a car. Right. So there's, you just don't know what you need when they need it. And the
Mhm.
last reason it's not helpful is because most, I mean, I always do this when I speak, as I ask audiences, raise your hands if you're really good at giving help. And 99% of the hands go up, probably 100. And then I say, keep your hand up if you're really good at asking for help. And almost all the hands go down. So you're putting the pressure on someone who is already feeling really vulnerable, terrified out of their mind, to come up with something that they might need and then to take the risk to ask for help. And most of us aren't good at asking for help under normal circumstances, let alone under these kind of very high pressure, high stakes circumstances. Because if you turn me down, that feels awful to
Yeah.
me.
Wow.
Um, so that's why that phrase is not a great phase. So I always tell the managers the first thing you need to do is just take a moment to connect.
Yeah.
And then the second thing you want to do is you want to ask questions. And I always think about, you know, Socrates type of learning is you always ask a question, right? And so you can say, how are you managing this right now? Right? You don't launch off into advice. That's the last thing you should do. You don't want to launch off into projects. That's the last thing you should do. You just want to find out, how are you managing this right now?
Mhm.
And then, you know, do you know what your treatment is going to be like? Like, how often are you going to be able to work?
Mhm.
Have you talked to HR yet? Right. So just have a bunch of series of questions that you're going to ask, none of them about getting the work done, but just focused on really what needs to happen. Now, I often have managers, I like to have managers take the time to sit back and to have another conversation with them.
Mhm.
So you can say to the employee, hey, this is really big news. I need a second.
Yeah.
Like, I just need a second.
Yeah.
Can we talk about this at lunchtime today? Or do you have time next week or Monday or whatever it is? But you want to circle back with them because you are going to have a conversation with them about the work that they can do, right? We don't know what their treatment is. Are they going to be out for 3 months? Are they going to be back in? Are they going to be out for 2 weeks? Are they going to be able to have treatment every Friday? And so they're going to be gone every Friday. You know, you have no idea. And the same thing goes for when you have an employee who is dealing with grief or when you have a team that's lost an employee. Is
Mm.
you just want to take a moment and say, hey, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about the work. We're going to talk about, you know, your workload, but let's just take a breather for a moment. Let's circle back in 24 hours.
Wow.
And this gives both you and the employee really great boundaries. And also, you want guardrails, right? And I always think about the bumpers they put up when you go bowling.
Yeah.
Right? You want, they're supposed to be for little kids, but I use
I
them
still
all the
need help.
time. I
Yeah.
know I still need
Yeah.
help. Exactly.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is you're going to start to build those bumpers, those guardrails. And that's exactly what your employee needs. Because
Wow.
your employee is terrified. They're
Yes.
terrified they're going to might lose their job. They're terrified they're going to lose their health insurance. They're terrified they're going to lose their life. They're terrified they're no longer going to be that key employee. Like, there's so much fear going on in their head. And your job as a manager is to help them decrease that fear by putting in place some good foundation, some good guardrails, so that they know what they can bump up against and what you know, so they feel safe.
That's a great, great word picture. That's amazing advice, Kim. And going back to right from the beginning, what you said is probably what most of us would say. Hey, hey, anything you need, I got you.
Yep.
But we don't know that, and they don't know that at that moment. I want to dive into a couple of more things that you said, but I want to go back to ask a little bit about employee privacy, and then how do you tell the team what's how do you navigate through that? And it might even be a little harder if the employee says, hey, keep this between you and I for now, but at some point things are going to become apparent. So as a leader, how do you navigate through that now with the team?
That's a really great question. I'm really glad you asked. So it's very tricky. Some employees walk in the office and said, I've already told the whole team you're the last person to know, right?
Wow.
Right.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, some employees do want to keep it secret. So what you can do in that point is look, if the employee, let's give an example. The employee is going to have chemo treatment every other week. That's going to take them out for about 4 days every 10 days. So they're only going to be able to work 6 days.
Mhm.
So what you as a manager, is your job is to deliver that information, but not mention that it's cancer. So it is that, this is what's happening.
Mhm.
These are the things we have put in place. So we're going to be talking about how we're going to have to pick up some extra slack to help during this time. And this is how I'm thinking about dividing it out. Would love your input.
Mhm.
You want to have the meeting without the employee there. This employee has asked that you don't ask what the issue is,
Right. Wow.
right?
Wow.
So you can,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
part of the initial conversation or part of the not the initial but the second conversation you have with the employee, if it's cancer, is you want to sit down and ask them what their boundaries are. Have you told the team? Do you want the team to know? What do you want the team to know?
Yeah.
Right. So be very specific about, do you want them to know? And then you can ask, why don't you want them to know? Because a lot of times people don't want the team to know because they're worried of a couple of things. One, they're worried about team members saying stupid things.
Yes.
We all,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, we're not well trained. And so a team member will come up and talk about their uncles, brothers, cousins, neighbors, uncle who beat cancer twice, right? And that's not helpful.
Right.
Or we say, if you need anything, let me know. We really don't mean that. Or we say, stay strong, which is never a good thing to say. It's just sort of like, it's like a mic drop, and it's not a very good one.
Yes.
So the employee doesn't want people saying those things to them. The employee doesn't want people seeing them as weak.
Yeah.
Right. So it's very, they don't want someone thinking, oh, they're not going to be able to do their job. So let me just take it over for them. So there's lots of reasons. So getting very clear understanding about why the employee doesn't want the information shared is really important. Sometimes I was working with a client. The employee was happy to have the information shared. She just didn't want to share it.
Mm.
So I I worked with the manager, and the manager came up with sort of not a script, but like bullet points of what to talk about. And in that talk, there was clear of you cannot ask, don't ask, don't do oh, how are you
Wow.
today?
Yeah.
Right. The employee came up with some very clear guidelines of how she wanted to be approached.
Yes.
And so the manager delivered those guidelines to the team, and the team felt great. The team was like, okay, now I know I can talk to her about this, but I can't, again, the guardrails.
Yeah.
So taking the time to really talk about that. Now, there's HIPAA, which is
Yeah.
the health. I should know, I'm in HR, Portability Act, um,
Yes.
health insurance portability, something, something.
Yes.
Um, so part of that is that you are supposed to not managers are not supposed to reveal anything to their coworkers. They're supposed to keep it's keep it quiet. It's really meant for hospitals and doctors and people involved in the medical field, but it also, if an employee asks you not to reveal it, it's your job not to reveal it. It's just a matter of respect.
Yes.
I have not come across any lawsuits where an employee has sued a manager or the company for revealing that they had this disease and caused them damage, but it could happen.
Yes.
So you do want to keep it private, if you possibly can. And that also means that you're not telling your peers. Like, so you're not at a manager meeting going, oh my God, did you hear that Janice has cancer? No, I didn't know. And so
Yes.
you can say, I've got a team member who's dealing with a health issue, but don't go into details.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing advice. And I want to ask this guy, I want to get back to if a team member passes away or someone that's grieving, but what do you do? And I imagine it's a little bit the same, but probably a little different. Because I'm curious as to what kind of support you got at work when your husband was going through this. And I know in my past I've had folks whose parents, that my mom is
Yes.
in stage 4, cancer, or a brother or a sister. How do you navigate that, or is it really almost the same?
It's really almost the same. I think the hardest thing about grief is that we have these stereotypes about what grief looks like.
Mhm.
And so if someone doesn't fit into the stereotype, then we just kind of forget. We forget that they're grieving. So the idea of grieving is that you're crying all the time, you can't function, you're a little spacey, you're always sad. And, my husband has been gone for 13 years and I still run into that stereotype. People are like, how are you? I'm like, it's been 13 years. I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
But there's that stereotype out there. So when you're dealing with someone at work who's grieving, they may come in and look fine, but you might find that their work is way below what they're used to do.
Mhm.
And or they're just kind of spacing out. They're just, they used to remember everything and they can't remember anything. Or their temper, all of a sudden they have a temper where they never had a temper. They're really short and pissy and kind of abrupt. So all those things come into play. And that's where you as a manager need to kind of sit down with the employee and say, look, like, I think the hardest thing about grieving is you don't realize how bad off you are until you're able to look back.
Mhm.
So at the end of 30 days, I was, actually at the end of 30 days, I thought I was doing pretty well. And then at the end of 3 months, I was like, oh, you were not functioning at the end of 30 days, right? And the end of 6 months, I looked back at 3 months and I thought, oh, you did not know what you were doing. You were better than the first 30, but you still didn't know what was going on.
Mhm.
So it's a little tricky for a manager because you're going to have to pull them aside. You have to see how their work is doing, but you're going to might have to pull them aside and say, hey, look, I'm noticing that there's a lot of errors in this one area, or your pie charts aren't what they're supposed to be, or you're missing deadlines. Let's talk about your workload, right?
Mm.
Let's take some things off your plate right now.
Mhm.
We'll add them back on as we in whatever time length you want. But it's oftentimes what'll happen is the employee will probably fight you on it, but then be really, really grateful
Yeah.
because they are in over their heads and there are chemical things that are happening in your brain that don't allow you to function at work, function at high focus, high intense situations, because your brain literally can't do that at the moment.
Mm. Wow. It, and I love that you're really recommending to have those conversations, right? Because we're probably one end on the other. We probably focus in sometimes too much on the business aspect, and then or we just say, hey, we're just going to give them time and space. We know the work is going to fall. We're not going to worry about their quota or whatever.
Right.
But you're saying really put it a little bit even back on their shoulders and say, hey, this is what I'm recommending. What do you think? I love.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just think that managers just they're the let's kind of
Yeah.
hands back.
Yeah.
That usually leads to an employee losing their job
Yes. Yeah.
because people are, oh, we'll just wait for them to get better, and seems to take it, the expectation is, oh, they'll be done in 30 days or they'll be better in 3 months. And it's, these conversations are so important, especially now that we're sort of in a talent scramble. If you really want to keep your employee, being honest and, radical candor, as Jill Scott, the author of that book, says,
I
is
love that.
really, really
Yeah.
important.
Yes. Radical candor. I love that. I love that. I want to go back to if you lose a team member and in some cases it could be sudden, some cases it couldn't. That was always one of the most difficult things to ever maneuver around as a leader. What are a couple of hints and tips you have for leaders that where a team member has passed away?
Yeah, so a couple really big ones. First, you need to acknowledge the loss and how you feel about the
Mhm.
loss. You as a manager will set the tone for your team.
Mhm.
So if you're like, well, good guy, really sorry he's gone, gosh darn it, and now we need to, but we still got these quotas we have to meet. That's the tone your team is going to take. They're not going to feel safe about talking about they're missing the employee.
Mm.
So you set the tone. So that means that you want to talk, I always tell people, managers, tell the truth. So if you don't know how they died, you don't know how they died. If you don't know when funeral arrangements are, when the memorial service or funeral is going to happen, then say that. And then, you want to build trust. And so that's a really great time to build trust. So you want to go in and say, I don't know when the funeral arrangements are. We are in touch with the family and we will do this. Let them know who you're in touch with. If you're not in touch with the family and you're looking, maybe there's a team member who's really close, you can say, hey, I really need your help with this one. I want to make sure that we show up at the service, that we do these things, and I don't know who to call. And the person's like, I got it. Right. And then, so you want to make sure you're setting the tone. The second thing I always recommend is that you have your own memorial service at work.
Oh, wow. Wow.
People are often
Yeah.
uncomfortable going to the family memorial service, right? Because they only know the person a little bit. They didn't know them outside of work, and they didn't know their kids, and they didn't know, so they just, and people will go, and I highly recommend you go. It's really important that the family see you there. But I also recommend that you have a memorial service at work. We do memorial services for us, for the people who are alive, and we do memorial services as part of a ritual that we all need rituals around death. And when you do it at work, set it up at a time where there's no meetings, right? So that it's not mandatory. Let them know what the agenda is going to be. When you go to memorial service, you often get a little pamphlet about what's going to happen, who's going to speak. So you want to do the similar thing. You want to find 2 or 3 employees who are willing to talk about the employee. You want to set the ground rules. Hey, this is exactly the place where you can cry. It's, and I'm a big proponent of not giving people tissues because it cuts off the emotion. So when people want to hand people tissues, but when you're doing that, basically what you're saying is, hey, stop crying.
Yeah, stop crying.
And so, make sure there's plenty of tissue boxes and everyone can have their own packet of tissues, right? Whatever it is, and have the service. And let people cry and let people talk and invite a family member if you can, if you want to, because they will get to see how their person is being honored.
Wow.
And the reason I recommend this is because there's oftentimes no place for employees to grieve. And if you don't give that space for grieving, you're really doing your team a disservice. And you're also doing yourself a disservice as a manager, because the sadness is there. It's not going anywhere. It's not like just because you're not talking about it, it's not apparent. Yeah. It's there. Yeah. The second thing I often recommend is if you can set up just kind of a crying room. Just a little place where people can go and just have a few tears, because grief does not run on a schedule. And so you may be thinking, oh gosh, I gotta show this to Tom. So make sure you're like, oh, Tom's dead. Oh, I feel so sad. And you just might need to have a good cry. Yes. 5 minutes, then you can come back and you can finish that thing that you want to do that Tom used to help you with. So it's you just give that space. I am not a big proponent of grief counselors coming in immediately, because the idea, one is because grief is so long-term. It doesn't like, having someone, if someone dies suddenly in the office, I think it's great to have some grief counselors around just to kind of like talk about the shock that they feel. But you have to keep them around for a while. The idea that grief counselors are going to be in the office for 2 days is ridiculous. Yeah. If you really want to be of service to your team, have a grief counselor that's available either on call, which is difficult and can be very expensive, or 3 to 4 days a week during set hours. Right. So that people have the option to show up and to talk and to feel like, I can't handle this right now, but I'm going to go talk to that grief counselor. I'm going to make a half-an-hour appointment to talk to that grief counselor on Tuesday. Right. So that they're there. But grief is one of those things where people, it's hard because it's personal and we all do it differently. But it is there. There's no ignoring it. So I think those are the couple things that I would recommend. Those are the couple things that I do recommend that organizations do.
Kim, that is, I loved everything you said, and I don't think I've been around a long time now. I don't think I ever even thought of the idea of to have our own memorial service, and that's just so smart to do, and could be just such a safe space for people to do. I want to be respectful of your time. This has just been amazing. I could talk to you all day, Even though, you've made what could be kind of a bleak topic really come to life with some great, great hints and tips. Um,
Thank you.
how can people get in touch with you? And I'm going to make sure I put that all over the place when I post this, but
Sure.
would love to let you say how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah. So in the beginning of the podcast, I talked about the one thing never to say
Yes.
to anyone. So there are 4 other things never to say to anybody. And so if you'd like to download that, plus also get what to say instead,
Okay.
you can go to 100actsoflove.com. That's the number 100. So 100actsoflove.com /what not to say. Very simple, no spaces, what not to say. And you can download 5 things never to say to anybody, what to say instead. So that's sort of like the primer kit, which will help anybody in any situation where they find themselves sort of speechless.
Yeah.
The people can find me in a couple different places. They can find me on LinkedIn. I do LinkedIn Lives every Thursday. So if they have a question or anything, they want to leave a comment every Thursday at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time. I do LinkedIn Lives. I also am on Instagram at 100actsoflove.com. And if you'd like to email me, just because you have a question, you're not sure what to do or need some support, please go ahead and email me at info@100actsoflove.com.
Wow. Kim, the last 2 things I'll say is you do such an amazing job here of just breaking, I don't want to say myths because that's probably not the right word, but breaking down these things that we thought were the right things to do all these years,
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
because one of the things that I know I probably said in the past was, "Hey, everything's gonna be okay." Well, I don't really know that, and that's definitely not the right thing to say.
Yes.
And there's so many things that because I've already saw, I'm not going to reveal them. I want people to go and see them. I've already saw the ones that I already downloaded. The things that the advice that you give there. But thank you so much. I think the second thing I want to just say is I hope you're not offended by this, but God bless you. Oh
Oh, thank
my gosh.
you.
Oh my gosh. God bless you for doing this. This is such important work. And even the most seasoned leader, I guarantee you there were several things you said that they're like, wow, okay, I never did that. I never thought of that. God bless you
Yeah,
for doing this because it
thank
goes
you.
way beyond business, goes way beyond, hey, I gotta hit my numbers this month. It's people and it's people's lives. And it is just so important that as leaders, we recognize that. And for you that, has that view and has that personal journey that you went on to be able to give the advice now that you're giving is just spectacular. So thank you. Keep
Oh,
doing what you're
thank
doing.
you.
Keep
Thank you
doing what
very
you're doing.
much. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I just want managers to know, you can be human and
Yes,
all the tips I gave will help increase your productivity. So
no
it's
doubt.
not like it's a moral issue for sure. You want to feel
Yeah.
good and you make your team feel good, but it's also a business issue. It does help your business if you can get in there and be frank and honest and open about it. So yeah, yeah.
Well, we're going to leave it there for
All
now.
right.
I hope to connect with you again soon. So, folks, this has been the Leading from the Middle podcast with Kenny and with Kim, and we will talk to you real soon. Kim, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much. You take care.